Now just step in front. Tell me how it looks for you.
It's great.
Does it look for you?
I think it's good.
Yeah, it looks like we went too far today. It was okay.
Yes.
All right, ready when you are.
Hotel. It's so good to see you here. I want to thank Brother Ransom for his libation of power. We have traveled over to South Africa since I've seen you last. And for those of you who do not know, and who are watching us from around the world, I'm just back from Johannesburg, where the University of Witwatersrand offered me, and I accepted, an honorary degree, D.Lit, from this 100-year-old university that was one of the liberal, if you can call anything in South Africa, during apartheid liberal. University of Witwatersrand, as well as the University of Cape Town, were the two universities that were considered liberal institutions. Which means basically that they allowed black students to sit in separate places, but in the same university. The others didn't allow black students at all. So this was, it was a great honor to go there and to meet with the Vice Chancellor, Dr. Zebulon Vilakazi, and also to be welcomed by the Chancellor of the university, who basically is in charge of the entire university, but the Vice President is like the president, rather the Vice Chancellor is like the president of the American universities. That's the person who runs the day-to-day activities. So we're really happy about that. We're also happy that we are alive on YouTube. You can always get us here. Normally on Sundays at 4 o'clock, we open up the Malefikete Santi Institute lectures. And we appreciate the fact that our audience, since COVID has begun to grow back as it was before, when we had large crowds of people trying to attend our lectures. So we're very happy today, and we're going to have a situation today that's going to be electric for you in terms of the information that you will learn and that you will have. So I always say that the Maleficete Asante lectures are lectures that teach us and move us to another level of understanding. And Dr. Ronaldo Anderson will be our next speaker on August the 7th. August the 7th, put that down, write it down, keep it. Those of you who are in Philadelphia, you can come to 5535 Germantown Avenue, and you can hear this outstanding Afrofuturist. Today we have a treat for you, a very special treat for you, and I'll introduce our speaker for today in just a few minutes. So we say, in the name of Atum and Ra, in the name of Amen, in the name of Ptah, in the name of Rug Sin, in the name of Mawari, in the name of Inkulu Inkulu, in the name even of Allah and even of Jehovah, and whatever you call the divine forces, whatever you call the cosmic experiences that created the universe, we say that our presence here really is a representation, as I've always said, of the star dust, that we all stardust. We are Sometimes we think we're greater than we are, but we are not. We're all the same stardust. We're made from the same sources. Actually, we came from the same material as the frogs, the same material as the trees. We're the same. There's nothing in the universe that is not a part of the same, you see, because that's how the universe is made. So we're so happy to be alive, but we know also that the end of life is death. But we don't fear death because we know that it is a part of life. And I was telling somebody the other day, in 1930, I wasn't here, so I don't know what happened in 1930. So I don't have any memory of 1930. I can read about it and learn about it. And when I'm gone, I won't know anything about that either. So that's the same. That is life. We live, we die. That is humanity. But we also try to live the best lives that we can. And that's why the Yoruba are correct when they say that the greatest virtue is iwa pele, that is good character. There's nothing better than good character, because good character is at the root of everything. And I learned that when I was in South Africa rather recently, and having the experiences I did at WITS, that there are so many words and so many languages, and they have 8 official languages in South Africa. They have more languages than that, but they have 8 official languages, and people learn different languages. It's amazing that in Africa people speak 3 and 4 languages just automatically. I mean, you just, you have to, because there are many, many different languages that are spoken. We hardly, at least me, I hardly speak one, because I'm certainly not fluent in any of them, even the one that I supposedly speak. But I try. But the wonderful thing about learning languages, and I've tried to learn languages, is that you discover that the name of the divine in each language may be different, but it's the same metaphor. The metaphor stands for the same thing. So that's why I tell people that the term God is really a metaphor. And it is a metaphor that has even been translated by the Christians as the unknown, the unseen, you see. Many people say, like the Shona people say, the deity, the supreme deity is Mawari, and that Mawari is greater than the sky, you see. This is a metaphor. It's not, people are trying to explain something that has not been concretized, but it is something that they know exists in the universe. And so we are happy today at the Malefi Keti Asante Institute on Germantown Avenue in Philadelphia to be coming to the entire world, because our audience, of course, comes from all over the world. And we have today Dr. Kimani Nehusi, who is indeed one of the eminent scholars of our time. We're very, very delighted that Dr. Nehusi is here. He's in our audience. And he is a graduate of the University of London. He studied Egyptology there. He is perhaps one of the 3 or 4 top persons that we know of in the African world who's working in the ancient language of Kemet. He has taught at the University of East London. He's an associate professor at Temple University. He is the author of the most comprehensive book on Guyana, a 700, almost 800-page book called A People's History of Guyana. This is, I mean, I've never written a 700-page book. I don't know what it takes to do that. That is something. But this brother did a 700-page volume of a country whose significance for us as African people is far greater than its size, because that's where George G.M. James, who wrote Stolen Legacy, was from. You see? That's where he was from. That's where Walter Rodney, who wrote How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, was from. You see? That's where Ivan Van Sertima, who wrote They Came Before Columbus, was from. All these great scholars, I mean, they may have preceded, but they are certainly no more eminent than our speaker tonight, Dr. Kimani Nehusi, whose book on libations, the African ritual, is one of the best books of its kind and one of the only books of its kind. This brother, I don't need to say much more about him except that his knowledge is profound, and he knows how to make it. I'm giving him a hint. He knows how to make it simple enough for those of us who are ordinary to understand what he's talking about. So at this time, we're going to invite him to take his time and to come, and we will put his PowerPoint flash. All right, thank you very much. Just 1 minute.
Hello, Dr. Nehusi.
You all right?
Yes, I'm. Wow.
Let's come up.
It takes a second. This one's pretty slow. There we go. Okay, which one?
The one at the top. Sorry.
For those on YouTube, we're just loading the presentation, and we will be ready momentarily. Oh, perfect. All right.
Good afternoon, everybody, including people in the audience here, including those who are looking and listening on Facebook and through other aspects of the social media. I stand here in the presence of the divinities, the gods of our ancestors. I stand here because of the precedents of my own ancestors. I give praise to Amun-Ra and to the divine creator by all the other names our people have known the creator in the vast spaces of place and time that the African experience of life fills. I stand here also because of the struggles of our political ancestors, Marcus Garvey, Imhotep, Harriet Tubman, and others whose names are far too numerous to mention. It is because of them that we are. And it's because we are, and we have always been, that I could be. I hope that what I say today will pass any test that they would want me to pass. And I certainly do hope that the glowing introduction that Dr. Asante presented will not be a letdown, or that my performance will not let it down. I want to talk today about lessons from ancient Egypt, African classical civilization. What I hope to achieve here are a couple of things. In 40 minutes, we cannot plumb the depths of this huge and greatly significant civilization. So what I want to do is talk about a few things that are going to be indicative and hopefully present Kemet, ancient Egypt, in the context of Africa. In other words, I want to show, or at least to indicate, that ancient Egypt is not an apparition by itself. It's not something that is divorced from the African past, meaning Africa before Kemet. And it is definitely also not divorced from all of us who sit here and who listen to this. We are all connected. African people have always connected. We know that in our, shall I say, theoretical presentation of these matters, we have a single community of Africans past, Africans present, and Africans who are to come, and that we are all connected in and by the circle of life. Because when you say somebody dies, they go back to the ancestor, and they may be sent back to this plane again. So it's a circle. And our people have always known that. And what I want to say, I hope, demonstrates this circle to all of us. So, what is Kemet, ancient Egypt, to us? Kemet is neither the beginning nor the end of us, as I said just now. Kemet may be the most known and admired flower, but it is not the only bloom from the African tree. There were other African high cultures before Kemet, and there were other African high cultures after Kemet. And if we have our collected way, there will be another African high culture sometime in the future. That's what we're building here. And we must know that. We must plan for the next 100, 200, 300, or 1,000 years, because our people understood the magnitude of time and space before anybody else. Kemet is a tree with roots deep in the African soil. And it's a soil and their roots that run from the very beginning of humanity. The first human beings were African people. And the first human values, as I'm going to show just now, were African values. This does not indict anybody else, except by comparison. Some people have lost their humanity. And it's for us to withstand the challenge, not only of recovering our history in this way, but always remaining human. So, one other lesson we need to learn from our contemplation of Kemet is this: that if we really begin to know ourselves, to develop what I have done here as self-knowledge, eventually we're going to become capable, or shall I say more capable, of the highest achievement. What do I mean by that? Currently, we exist in a state of relative self-ignorance. Too many of us really don't know who we are because we don't know who our ancestors are and what they achieved. And we have been victimized by a minimal, limited, and demeaning representation of ourselves. Check the media. Right now, somebody was complaining to me that the British media, the BBC, that we've been taught to hollow, especially if you come from a colonized British country like mine, they're presenting monkeypox as an African disease. All the representations of the victims of monkeypox are African people. And guess what? The people who are mostly suffering from monkeypox are not Africans. I use this merely to illustrate that we are victims of a relentless campaign of minimization and negativity. It is expressed in every single area of human existence. And medicine is just one of them. Our challenge is to overcome that, to recognize that what passes as news, history, social sciences, and so on, is really white propaganda against African people. So if we really understand who we are, the concept, the picture we have of ourselves will improve. We will know that we are capable of far more than we have been, shall I say, allowed to think that we are capable of. We are going to respect ourselves more. We're going to set higher goals for ourselves. We're going to work harder to achieve those goals. And you know what? We're going to achieve far more than we currently do. So, self-knowledge ultimately leads to the highest achievement. That's why our ancestors say, if you know the beginning well, the end will not trouble you. Too many of us do not know our beginnings. We do not know our own story. And we try to do something that is impossible, like picking up a novel or any book and reading from 3/4 way to the end, chapter 33 or something like that, and think that we could understand the entire story. That's as stupid as we have been, because we do not try to retrace our steps and find out who we really are. What has been the journey of our people? Where did we start? Where did we go? It's only when we could answer these questions with some degree of accuracy, of knowledge, that we could answer the very fundamental questions of our existence. Where are we at? And where do we still need to go? Let us go. The significance of Kemet is African achievement of the highest quality. We know that. It's also an achievement of over 6,000 years of endurance. Now, this is important. You know, the Eurocentric chronology gives us about 3,000 years. Let's take that. Which state do you know, or do we know, existed for 3,000 years? There is none. The current hegemon of the world, which is coming to an end, was in existence for 50, 75 years. Think about it. Depending upon how you measure it, it's only in 1945 with the Bretton Woods institutions that the United States of America began to overtly dominate the world. That's recent in the history of humanity. And right now, with de-dollarization, with the growing harmonization of interests between other large countries, Russia, China, Iran, India to a certain extent, and so on, the various stands in Central Asia. The writing is on the wall. The decline will be relative, but the hegemon will no longer be able to walk about the world and murder progressive leaders, overthrow regimes, seize critical resources, and keep other parts of the world in poverty. Those of us who fancy ourselves as Africans should be wondering, thinking, and plotting how we could take advantage of the situation. But that's a topic for another occasion. I'm saying that like our ancestors, we must recognize existence, our existence in terms of thousands of years, and we must plan as long and as large as that. Kemet also signifies for us as African people, and as for humanity in general, the earliest self-detailed models of African humanity is important. Self-detailed. This is significant, especially in the context in which I mentioned just now, where other people have always been misrepresenting us and misrepresenting us negatively. So here you have information developed by African people about African people. This is unbiased information. They weren't seeking to impress anybody. They were just recording things as a matter of course. These are the words of our ancestors. They're not the words of cultural outsiders who are often biased or worse, hostile and prejudiced. Let us consider language very quickly, the middle nature. I was a little bit impatient to get away from this because I talk about it all the time. And I want to talk about other aspects. So you might forgive me if I rush through this and you feel that, you know, he didn't deal with that in enough detail for me, but you could always ask me questions after. I think we have 2 hours for questions. 2 hours. Oh, sorry, 3? Hey, you're limiting the audience? Yeah. Oh, don't do that to them. Please tell me when it's 10 minutes more to go.
Okay.
What's the significance of language? We could talk on end with that, but let's us recognize that language is a marker of humanity. You do not have human beings without language. Also, language is a supreme representation of culture. Language contains history also, of people's history. Language is both a record and a witness of a people's progress through space and time. If we understand language correctly, we'll get so many things from it. And I hope I'll show you some of them as we proceed this afternoon. Language is different from writing. Writing is an attempt to represent language physically, graphically. Our ancestors were the inventors of writing, the middle nature. We need to understand and celebrate that. We need to recognize that the middle nature, which other people call hieroglyphs, from the Greek hiero and glyph, which means sacred writing, a relatively accurate translation in this case of middle nature, which means almost the same thing. We have an investment in the middle nature that's greater than the Greeks and other Europeans have in Greek and Latin. We need to understand that. It's not that Europeans shouldn't go reading Greek and Latin and glory if there is glory in that. What I'm saying to us is that if we study and when we study and understand the ancient Egyptian language, middle nature, we get far more from it than the Greeks and the Romans could get from studying Greek and Latin. It's so tremendously important for us. That's a whole topic of investigation, or at least discussion. The language, Middle Nature, was significant in state formation. Ancient Egypt, I'm going to talk about this just now, was the first confederation of states in the world. Think about it. There were 42 to 44 states, depending upon what time you're looking at it. And all of them came together to make one nation. So when people talk about the United States as 50 different states or 50 different nations and so on, this is an achievement. But we need to know that we did that thousands of years before the people who did the United States. And our people didn't bash heads, create cultural genocide and physical genocide and mass thievery to create their state. So we could begin to make those comparisons and illuminate the significance and meaning of Kemet for us and draw lessons from all of that. The language was also a way of harmonizing the speech of people. It was a way of making certain that everybody understood everybody else. There are passages in the Middle Nature which tell us that the people from the far north, the Delta, couldn't understand well the people from the south when they met in person to converse. But the writing was a way of bridging those differences. There were at least 5 different dialects that the Middle Nature bridged. And we need to understand that. It put people in touch with each other in the same generation. And that remains a challenge for African people today. How could we, for example, the people in the Nguni languages, you could write an alphabet that would standardize and harmonize people's expression of themselves. So they could write and read easily. You may speak your own dialect in your place, and when you meet your people in a cosmopolitan setting, you're free to do that. It's easy, but it's also a good thing to be able to communicate in a single language. That's Pan-Africanism. Our ancestors in Kemet taught us that tool towards achieving Pan-Africanism. What are we doing about it? That's one of the lessons we could learn from the Middle Nature. It's standardization and harmonization of language, of written language. The Middle Nature also increased the area of communication. Before writing, if an official wanted to communicate with somebody outside of earshot, they had to send a message. And good as they were, messengers had certain risks about them. You could forget a critical part of the message. Somebody could detain you, all kinds of things. But when you write it down, it says what it means and means what it says. And you could write a message and send it to wherever you want to send it. There's another thing about the range of communication in writing. Today we read what our ancestors wrote 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. Just think about it. We read what our ancestors wrote 5,000 and 6,000 years ago. So language, written language, bridges time. We could also read the Middle Nature and make certain that we are not subverted by the biased and prejudiced misrepresentations of those cultural outsiders I mentioned just now. So we have intergenerational transmission of information, of insight, of knowledge when we read the middle nature. One lesson that comes out of this is that we must read it. We must learn the middle nature, the hieroglyphs, ancient Egyptian, whatsoever you want to call it. It is our language. It is not difficult to learn. Most of us think it's difficult because it has been misrepresented as difficult to us. If I could learn it, you can too. I don't have 2 heads and 3 brains. So, it's a challenge that our people must take up if we want to elevate ourselves, if we want to make certain that we are as prepared as we are for the challenges that life throws at us. I talked about state formation just now, and I'm just going to rush quickly into, see how long I was detained in language? Yeah, I'm just going to rush quickly to tell you something about the state of Kemet. The arrangement was the same on every aspect of human reality. In the spiritual context, there was the head, you might say. I don't want to be hierarchical, but there was a leader in the spiritual context. That was the Pera, the Pharaoh, as we would say. And each state had a corresponding spiritual leader who had the same responsibilities in his or her state. It was usually a man, and we could explain that just now if you want to. Doesn't mean that there was male dominance. And all of those different states, 42, 44, had a kind of allegiance to the person, you might say, above, the Pharaoh, the leader of the entire country. So you could propitiate your own divinity in the state you come from, but you could see yourself represented in Amun-Ra or Atum or whichever was the prevailing divinity of the entire country. It was the same in each aspect of culture. Fact is, there was a ritual in which all the shrines of the different states were put together on the same field to symbolize the unity of the people of Kemet. Is there a lesson there for us? You could be yourself while being part of something greater than yourself. Too many of us believe that Pan-Africanism is a means of marching African people into a single aspect, a single definition of similarity, of sameness. That's nonsense. There is no single way of being an African. There must be variations in the huge expanses of geography and time occupied by the existence of our people. And we must not see variation through the eyes of our oppressors who call those variations differences. And even when they're genuine differences, we must make certain that we work towards bridging them. Because our experience has been one in which we have done that consistently for the greatest part of our existence. That's a lesson we need to learn. So in the political context, the social context, it's the same thing. And guess what? Language is the enabler. Language is the enabler to achieve all of those things. I said early on that the first values of the African people were human values. And I think it's important for us to reflect upon that. One of the greatest concepts articulated by our people in Kemet is Ma'at. I was about to give other ways of writing it in the Medu Necha, and I forgot, so I was rushing around too. So you see, or really was supposed to be followed by other ways of representing Ma'at. So for example, if you're looking the penultimate sign, that feather, that by itself could mean Ma'at, and often does mean Ma'at. Or you could stick the feather into the headband of a woman who is located in a certain position, a classical pose, and she represents Ma'at. But since this is not a class in Medu Necha, I hope I will be forgiven for not indulging in each detail of these niceties. I also wish to be forgiven for an incomplete presentation of the various aspects of Ma'at. I have here harmony, order, justice, reciprocity. Could anybody tell me what's missing? Come on, you scholars. Truth, yes. Righteousness. Truth, righteousness. There's one or two more. There's another one. Justice is done. Balance. We have some scholars here. Thank you very much for helping me out. Now, Ma'at is accessible through each one of these portals or doors. But the room they lead into, Ma'at itself, is far grander than each one of these. And it's important for us to understand that when we say harmony, order, justice, balance, and so on, we are just describing the boundaries of this concept, but not the concept itself. This is something that is at once persuasive or pervasive and profound. And we must remember that. It will take a long time to understand this, develop a greater knowledge and appreciation of it. There are deeper meanings and larger lessons in these things. And I want to take a few minutes before I rush on to finish this presentation and throw it open for questions. 2 minutes. Sorry?
2 minutes until questions.
2 minutes until? I told you tell me 10 minutes before.
2 minutes till 10 minutes. 2 minutes till 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'm reprieved. All right. Let's talk quickly then. The notion of Ma'at, which embodies cosmic or universal order, has been foreshadowed, preceded in African society. In other words, African people had this thing long before ancient Egypt. And that's why we need to study ancient Egypt in its historical and cultural context. Because lots of what we see appearing in ancient Egypt did not appear out of thin air. These are developments and rearticulations of what our ancestors had before ancient Egypt. So let's look at the Mbuthi people. These are small people, okay? And they still exist in Central Africa. When you look at the representation of divinities like Bes and Puta in Kemet, these are the Twa or Mbuthi people. The Europeans call them by the insulting name of pygmies, so I'm going to mention it here so that we know who we're talking about. We have not been educated about those ancestors of ours, so we don't know how important their contributions to us through Kemet and directly to Kemet have been. Think about the name Baka that they call themselves. That alone, we could spend perhaps a session discussing that name. You know? So we have a lot of work to do to understand ourselves. So the Mbuthi have a concept called ikami, and it means cosmic order. Order in the social sphere, moral sphere, so on. There's another concept called akimi, which is the opposite to ekemi, which means disorder, cosmic disorder. You see where I'm going with this? In ancient Egypt, the same thing is called ma'at, and the opposite to ma'at is isfet. Isfet could be articulated through tef, which means idle chatter. Okay? Aimless talk. It could be articulated through another term, let me read this, which means speech, but speech that's not good. Okay? In ancient Egyptian also, we mustn't forget that the opposite to ma'at is isfet. So what you have is something and its opposite in both of these subcultures, both of these languages. Okay? So Medu Jew, which means speech that's evil, it's not good, is an elaboration of isfet. An aspect, if you wish, of isfet. But our people have this importance of speech. Now, in ancient Egypt also, there's a term bit, which means character, quality, disposition, characteristic, moral worth, and reputation. Our people were concerned with character. Dr. Santi mentioned character earlier in this presentation. And there are words in ancient Egyptian that tell us this. The word nebkeb, male owner of character. Nebetked, female owner of character. This means people, men and women, of good character. In Yoruba, as Dr. Santi mentioned, is Iwapele. The people of the Igbo, they have a term for it. And if you go throughout Africa, you're going to see this concern for people of good character. If we plumb the depths of Middle Nature and ancient Egyptian, we're going to find that there was an investment in the collective above the individual. It doesn't mean that individuals were not important. Everybody had space to grow and express their individuality, but it was known and recognized that no individual was greater than his or her family, or community, or nation. Human relations was dictated by these considerations. We don't have time to go into that. But at the level of man-woman relations, for example, it was recognized that men and women were different, but complementary beings, equal and complementary beings, working towards the same objectives. This is particularly important as a model for our troubled relations today that too often break down because we do not know how to live the lessons of our ancestors. And we look in the wrong places for models, where relationships are defined by contradictory aims and objectives. You know, binary contradictions, where one person feels that he or she must oppress the other person in order to be big and successful. And this is a model of personal relationships that's reflected at the level of the hegemonic state. That's what I was talking about just now. And there's benefit for us in examining these things, but we don't have time. The last thing I want to talk about is spirituality. All of this that I'm saying is represented in the spirituality of our people. We were taught to be humble, to know that none of us is greater than our environment, than anybody else, and that our collective is more important than us. This has articulations in the book of Pretem Heru, the book of obtaining righteousness, not what Europeans call it, book of coming forth by day. We could talk about that if you want to. And, you know, things like the judgment, like the declarations of innocence, which Moses preceded into the 10 Commandments, that's presented at 2 places in the Bible and so on. All these are spin-offs from our people's spirituality. So I want to stop here and to invite questions. Again, I want to record my sincere gratitude for being invited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nehusi. All right, at this time, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and I'll come over with the mic. Does anyone have questions?
Good evening, and thank you for coming. You made a distinction about Egypt, saying that our ancestors, they had this knowledge before Egypt, and it sounded as if Egypt wasn't a part of Africa. So why did you couch it in those terms?
Well, thanks for the question, but I was assuming that all of us recognize Egypt as a part of Africa. And the continuity between Egypt and Africa before and after Egypt, I think I think I was clear in pointing it out. So Egypt indeed is a part of Africa.
But the West isn't portraying it in that way in this day and time, so that's why my question. I'd just like to say my wife, Catherine, she's from Guyana, and so she's here with us too.
Okay, thanks. Catherine, which part of Guyana?
I'm from Mocha.
I know where Mocha is, inside there, man.
Which part of Guyana are you from?
The best part.
No, we're not going to go there because every time when you speak, you say, I'm going to tell you about that just now. I always have problems with him. He said, why do you say just now? It's supposed to be that it happened. And I said, there goes my Guyanese.
I'm from Queenstown Village on the Essequibo coast.
Well, that's where my daddy's from.
What's his name?
Cave. The cave.
Varnum?
Not Varnum, Patrick.
My jeez, you.
Yes.
Wow, how about that?
Small world.
Yes, it is. It is.
Family.
Perhaps. But I must steal a moment to tell you about the people of Queenstown. I mean, these were the first Africans who said, we're going to organize ourselves and be responsible for raising money and looking after community affairs. You know, other people followed suit shortly after. I mean, immediately after the legal termination of physical enslavement in Guyana and throughout the Caribbean. Some people mistake that for emancipation, but it wasn't. People formed villages, communities, organized themselves. And that's one of the distinctions of both Mocha and Queenstown. So I'm very glad to have made this reacquaintance.
Thank you. We have a question right here.
Yes. The question I have is, how, due to the fact that we do not control the mainstream media all over the world, even though we have black billionaires, we own something like 16% or 1% of mainstream media. How can we instill in the minds of our people the concept that was promoted by Sheikh Anta Diop when he wrote the book, The Cultural Unity of Black Africa. If we understood that concept, we would understand that we could be Yoruba or we could be Akan, and at the same time, we would understand the cultural unity. We would have unity. And the worst thing, you came to spirituality, worse than taking the land, worse than enslaving us, they successfully colonized God. And you go to Ghana and you have people, everybody is from dark brown to blue black, and you got people bleaching their skin. Or you go to Dravidian India, exotically beautiful people, women that are bleaching their skin. That's because of they successfully colonized God. So how can we? Because when Bill Cosby and them tried to buy, I think it was CBS, and they had the money and they wouldn't sell it to them. And the message was, black people, we don't care how much money you have. You are not going into the minds of the masses that will, like us, because of what it would mean. So how can we do this? Because we would have unity.
Thank you very much for the question, brother. I would begin by rephrasing, if I may, part of your presentation. And I would say they have not successfully colonized God. They think they have. And it may appear so to some of us. They have done a huge job in that direction. But the fact that you and I are having this discussion here doesn't suggest success on their part to me. And I know that this is just one audience. Many of our people are resisting that with information, with education. And here's the thing, 20 years ago, and 40 years ago, and 60 years ago, we weren't doing those things to the extent that we're doing them now. And this generation is marked by a quality of information and understanding and reclamation of ourselves that wasn't as widespread in previous generations. What I'm coming to us with here is this, that the days when our oppressors could feel comfortable in the confidence that they had control of our minds, those days are over. They could murder Kwame Nkrumah. They could murder Patrice Lumumba. They could murder many of our leaders. We don't like it. But my friend Black Stalin from Trinidad, Sang Kaiso, say they kill Zulu, more come. They kill this, more come. And I believe, fact is, I know that our ancestors left us models that will enable us and have enabled us to resist the evil that other people wish to visit upon us.
Yeah.
This is a resistance that's rolling down the hill. And every year it's going to get bigger. And every year it's going to get heavier. And every time we look at it, it's going to be mightier. And the reason for that is that we are liberating our minds. And so, they colonized God. But we're taking back God.
Thank you, Dr. Nehusi. We have one final question for you.
Doctor, thank you for your explanation, which we all understand that it was in Africa that spirituality and good character existed before even Mott. Was the specialty about Mott, was that when the first time it was recorded in writing or in symbol, the principles of good character and spirituality? And I also was thinking about Dr. Marimba Ani's theory of Yurugu, have you come across some sense of the incomplete being or the person that represents Isfit?
Thanks very much for that question. Yes, the whole existence of notions of good character in previous iterations of Africa, meaning before Kemet, tells us that our people were familiar with the constructions you describe as people of not good character. Fact is, Ikemi, Akami, contradiction illustrates that, it articulates that they were people who were not really good. These are not good examples for us to follow, you know. And our people were always aware of the value of holding up these moral ideals. And we need to be very clear. They didn't say that everybody must achieve every one of them 100% of the time. They were concerned with us really trying hard to upkeep them. And this is what the Declarations of Innocence is about. So thanks for that question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that was the first time it was literally written down. Those principles, we know those principles exist to antiquity, but it was when Ma'at was formulated or recorded, was that the first time it was put in writing?
Well, it was the first writing, so I'm going to say it was the first time it was put in writing. They're symbolic representations of different things, and there's, you know, lots of debates to be had about the meaning of some of those symbols that were recorded before the phase we call writing occurred. And there are all kinds of things to be talked about there. You know, you could look at the origin of Ma'at as coming out of the building and construction industry. It originally meant a straight line. And then as Kemet expanded, they lifted the concept of straightness from building and construction and relocated it as Ma'at in the moral considerations, moral rules. And so it was expanded and blah, blah, blah. But that's where it came from.
I know time's running out, so I'm going to ask my question quickly. As you know, Gao was the major intellectual center in Senegal. And there's an African language, Gao, as well. Do you see a deep connection between that language and ancient Egyptian?
Yes. I don't know Gao as much as I perhaps should know about it. But all over all over Africa, you see those connections, and the connections are generally because of two things. One, what I hope I conveyed, at least indicatively, as the oneness of Kemet with the rest of Africa. Two, through direct migrations from Kemet into those other parts of Africa. You talk to the people of West Africa and they generally tell you that they come from the Nile Valley. And even those who resist that notion have among them the evidence. Consider this. Thomas Sankara. Sankara is a pure ancient Egyptian name. There's a pharaoh called Sankara. In the mosque at Sankore in Mali, Sa-ko-re, ancient Egyptian. The location of the university inside the mosque is not something that the Muslim people originated. That arrangement existed in Kemet. And we could go on and on and on. One of the guys who overthrew Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, his name was General Ankara. Ankara. I often wonder if he would have behaved in the same way had he understood the origin and possible meaning of his name. But these are things that we must challenge ourselves with, lessons that we must learn. I don't have enough time to plumb the depths of that question once again, but I hope that my answer is indicative of where we could go.
I think
Oh, you just put it down.
oh boy, let's give another hand. Right. I told y'all. We one of the things we have here at the Maleficenti Asante Institute, we have actually some of the best scholars in the world coming through here, and I'm just so happy that at least we can meet together again, and we have some great lecturers coming up for you. The next one is actually on August the 7th, and we have a lineup. We have Dr. Nadav. We got Yesenia Escobar, who is from Colombia, where they have just elected a vice president who is an African Colombian, Francia Marquez, whom I met when I was in Buenaventura. So we're looking forward to Yesenia Escobar talking about her. We have Tugu Sanusi on Arabization and Europeanization of Africa. We have attorney Michael Cord. We have contemporary issues in Africa. And we have United States of Africa. And where do we go from here? And with Dr. Jabali Ade and others. So we got coming up on the 7th, Dr. Ronaldo Anderson, Afrofuturist African American Society, Wither the People. So this is just a little bit of what we're going to be doing at the Institute. We also have thought of an idea that might be very powerful, and that is to discuss books that you do not read in high school or college. We may have sessions where we discuss the books that you will never get in high school or you will never get them in college. And the idea came because, in Texas, state of Texas, they have banned books. All kinds of books are banned. In particular, if they deal with sex or if they deal with race, if they deal with white supremacy, they just ban those books outright. They cannot. Children in high school can't read those books. We can't have it discussed. So we said we're gonna have all the books that you can't get in college and high school. We're gonna study and discuss those books. So that's going to be a session that we're going to develop that series in the next few months. But we want you to know that we are very happy for all of you. Want to thank again our eminent scholar. Thank you so much, brother. You are an amazing intellectual, and we're very, very happy to have you here and have you as a part of the work that we do. We want to also thank Toyosi Abadaran, our technical person, and our board members, Kareem Board and Carlton Sudan, who have just been with us and have worked with us to get us to a high level technically. And we give thanks also to Anna Yaninga, who is our director, for the work that she's done to make sure that we have an excellent program. So we're on a roll, and we are happy. We're pleased to see all of you. Our audience is getting more excited each time, so that's good. So put on your calendar on August 7th at 4 o'clock. Those of you who are in the rest of the world, our friends from Great Britain, or we should say Britain, because I remember. No, I know that, listening to Dr. Nehusi, I know that things change. At one time we used to say Great Britain, but now we just say Britain. And we used to say United States is not the hegemon that it used to think it was. And certainly after flying to Johannesburg on Qatar Air, I know that the American Airlines are not very good either. So, so I'm just really delighted to let you know that we will be discussing all of that. May the ancestors bless us. And then we say, we call upon our ancestors far and near, the mother of our mothers, the father of our fathers, to render mercy and to bear witness for the liberation and the victory of all oppressed people forever. And then we say, it is done. Asante Sana. Go ahead.
All right. I just want to thank the 150 people on YouTube that were with us in spirit, and for all of those who came in. Thank you so much. We are officially on Cash App for donations as well. Our tag is $MKA Institute. So we're officially on there, and we thank you so much for all of the support and the donations that you've already sent in. So I just wanted to make that announcement, and thank you again for coming. Be safe.
Good.